fate of Syria lies in Trump's hands. Everything is pointing to a real confrontation between the U.S. and Russia over the retaking of Idlib in Syria. And when everything is pointing in one direction, I always like to look the other way to see what might really be going on. My latest article at Strategic Culture Foundation lays out my argument that there will be no direct confrontation between the United States and Russia over this. Let me repeat. My argument is there will be no direct conflict between the U.S. and Russia. And it boils down to that the incentives for everyone, including crazy John Bolton, are for the U.S. to bluster and threaten in order to save face because, in short, they are bluffing over World War III and Trump holds all the best hole cards. We'll see if the power elite see it my way. Because now we have the neoconservatives in the Trump administration and in the K Street think tanks all goading Trump to show strength and not let Putin, Assad, and Iranian President Hassan Rouhani win in Syria. These people, the John Boltons and the Nikki Haleys, laptop and coffee clutch bombardiers all, believe that showing strength is the only way to protect America's interest because that's all these animals know, apparently. It's an easily digested lie told enough times, but it's still a lie. And here we are on the 17th anniversary of 9/11 listening to the media and these same prominent government officials who all failed us that day arguing for leniency for Al-Qaeda, of all people, from Russia and Syria. This is an affront to every person who died that day, their families, the first responders who tried to help, and anyone with an ounce of decency or shame. But then again, look who we're talking about here. The fact that they continue to spin this policy of regime change in Syria for cynical geopolitical goals, even when we've been proven to be on the wrong side of this war, is breathtaking. Never forget that we're the aggressors in Syria. But then again, being a neocon means never saying you're sorry for wasting other people's lives as proxies for your grand dreams of social engineering by bombing people into goodness. This was, after all, the main theme of the week-long eulogy for the evil John McCain, who, by the way, is still dead. Yay! Instead of threatening Assad with a, quote, much stronger response over the use of chemical weapons, John Bolton and the Trump administration should be withdrawing their support of Jabhat al-Nusra, or whatever the hell they're calling themselves this week, like we did during the retaking of Daraa just a few weeks ago. Because these threats give these head-chopping Salafist animals the excuse they need to stage such an attack and invite the very military response all sane people would avoid at all costs. But then again, look who we're talking about here. As the Syrian Arab army prepared for the Daraa operation, the same apocalyptic rhetoric began from the usual suspects. Haley, the war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu, and our Secretary of Statelessness, Mike Pompeo. But the order from the Trump administration came down via back channels through Jordan that there would be no pledge of support to rebels holed up there. And the operation was over in a matter of a couple of weeks. No humanitarian crisis. The White Helmets were evacuated to begin preparing their next round of stage outrage, and many of the rebels allowed graciously to relocate to Idlib. Which brings us to today. We're staring at an insanely dangerous state of provocation between the U.S. and Russia because Idlib represents the loss in Syria the U.S. political establishment has been dreading since the day Russian Sukhois began flying sorties over Syria in October 2015. With each victory over our pet head choppers, the Russians and the Syrians have allowed most of them and their families safe transport out of the area, to Idlib, because their highest priority was restoring people to their homes and securing territory to begin bringing sanity to the region. Does this sound like the brutal butchers the neocons keep trying to paint these people as? Does this sound like people who would use chemical weapons after already committing to weeks of urban warfare while making steady gains? If they were, we wouldn't be staring at having to flush out 100,000 of them from amidst a few million Syrians. They would all be dead at this point, along with some more civilians. So that has always been the plan from the U.S.'s perspective. Postpone the big final battle and then cry humanitarian crisis on the eve of Assad's victory, because until that point, no piece of Syria west of the Euphrates River was worth threatening World War III over for either side. And that's where we are right now. The man who holds the future of the region in his hands is President Trump. The Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, VIPs, have just sent a letter to Trump outlining why he needs to back down here for the good of everyone. Quote, Mr. President, We are concerned that you may not have been adequately briefed on the upsurge of hostilities in northwestern Syria, where Syrian armed forces with Russian support have launched a full-out campaign to take back the al-Nusra al-Qaeda ISIS-infested province of Idlib. The Syrians will almost certainly succeed, as they did in late 2016 in Aleppo. As in Aleppo, it will mean unspeakable carnage unless somebody finally tells the insurgents theirs is a lost cause. That someone is you. And the Israelis, the Saudis, and others who want the unrest to endure are egging on the insurgents, assuring them that you, Mr. President, will use U.S. forces to protect the insurgents in Idlib and perhaps also rain hell down on Damascus. We believe that your senior advisors are encouraging the insurgents to think in these terms, and that your most senior aides are taking credit for your recent policy shift from troop withdrawal from Syria to indefinite war, unquote. They go on from there. It's well worth your reading. Furthering the uncertainty, they aver rightly is that Moscow has no idea who in the hell is in charge in the Trump administration, Trump or his advisors who consistently undermine him. It's a very fair point, and one that Trump himself can clear up with a phone call. I can only hope that that call has already been made, and my scenario of U.S. threats to save face in the face of abject defeat is the correct one. Because Trump needs to not start a war on the eve of the midterms. If he does, he will lose a lot of his base. And the deep state is goading him into doing this while ratcheting up their open sedition against him. Idlib is shaping up to be the thing which will define Trump's legacy. He wants to be the guy who broke through all the geopolitical Gordian knots, bring peace to the Middle East, denuclearize North Korea, revive U.S. manufacturing, bust the globalist cartel ownership over the EU and D.C. while driving a hard bargain for the future with China. Everyone in Washington, the City of London, and the European elites I call the Davos crowd wants the exact opposite. They know Putin is playing for time to finish Russia's rebuilding process. They also know Trump is not on board with their plans for transnational control via supranational treaties. But they also know that if the shooting starts in Syria and Russia retaliates, the full force of all of Israel's enemies will be unleashed, and there will be little to stop that from wiping them off the face of the earth. And that might be the biggest incentive for peace in D.C. there is. Mr. Trump, the options are in front of you, and please, please choose wisely.